Okay, we might get started now as it is time to begin. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you once again for joining us today for the webinar on why do most CRM implementations fail. I would especially like to welcome Peter Flory, who is our presenter for today. Peter is based in the UK and he has kindly donated his time to do the webinar for us at a very early hour in the morning over there. I think it's only 6:30, so on behalf of Connecting Up and obviously everyone who attended, we really appreciate your time and we thank you very much for doing this for us, Peter. Just a few housekeeping notes for those of you who are new to this webinar and have never attended one before. We will be taking questions along the way. If you can type your questions in the question box on your webinar panel, and then we will address them as we go and maybe towards the end, depending on how we go with time as well. We are also recording this webinar, so if you do have something that came up, you can catch up on the recording later on. Other than that, I won't take up too much more of time because Peter does have quite a fair bit to go through, and I will hand it over to you, Peter, now.
Hello, everybody. From a quite cool England where it's just about getting light now. This session is called CRM and why do CRM implementations fail? And I put what is CRM at the top because I think we ought to talk about what it is to start with, because there is a lot of confusion about what it really is, and that's one of the reasons why so many implementations fail. Here is a definition. It's a bit scary. It's what I call my academic definition, and I guess you can all read it, but I will read it anyway. It says, not-for-profit sector CRM encompasses all the processes that enable the organization to fulfill its social mission by acquiring and retaining customers, funders, service users, volunteers and suppliers alike, and facilitating two-way exchange of high-quality customized products and services that best fit their needs and criteria, in return for compensation which may or may not be financial and which may or not be tangible. Isn't that a wonderful load of academic jargon? But then I don't apologize because it was written for a PhD thesis. So how about this one? This is a little bit more understandable. NFP CRM is the process of doing good by attracting and keeping customers, i.e. everyone you come into contact with, being nice to them and giving them what they want. Money comes into it, but only as a means to an end. One of the things to note there is that I believe that CRM in our sector is related to everybody you come into contact with. It's not just the people that give you money, as CRM is in the business world. It's just who gives you the money. But in our sector, I believe the principles apply to literally everybody. So it's not just about fundraising databases or membership databases as it used to be sometimes in the past. It's a bit broader than that. And here's another reason as to why things fail, because that very first point on this screen, it's not an IT system. CRM is an organizational philosophy. It covers everything the organization does, every interaction they have with the people they come into contact with. And so many times I see CRM, oh yes, that's the province of the IT manager. It gets dumped on IT and people don't see the bigger picture. And that is fundamentally wrong. It's not just your database. However, you can't do it effectively without a decent database system. So that's probably why a lot of people don't want to think about it and think, oh, it's just a database. So it's everything you do and everyone in your organization's involved. Here are what I call the 8 principles People talk about all sorts of buzz phrases, the 360-degree view, the complete supportive view, all sorts of things like that. Well, these are the principles. You have to have a 360-degree view of your supporters, and that means you have to include every interaction they have with the organization in your data store of some sort. You have to make all those interactions visible to everybody in the organization, and you have to integrate all your systems together. The next bit is understanding what you do with the data. You have to gather knowledge, you have to analyze it, you have to plan, then you've got your relationships, the actual interaction with the customers, and this is another one of the places where things go wrong. We'll look at some examples later, but if you look at this means dramatic cultural change to most organizations, and this is a fundamental place where things never ever get implemented properly. We'll talk a bit more about that later. This one means high skill levels. How many people can really do the data analysis that's needed to understand customers properly? Not many people can do it. It's a very skilled job, and not many people have those skills, so it doesn't get done properly. And this one is being nice to people, and it needs fundamental change in your reaction to your customers because they are so close to you now, much closer than they ever were in the past. So we'll look at some of those examples later. CRM consists of, at the very highest level of abstraction of these three things: collaborative CRM, operational CRM, and analytical CRM, and they're not the same thing. But fundamentally, collaborative CRM is all about the actual communications, the process of communications. Operational is your back-end database, to put it in a nutshell. And analytical CRM is what I call the clever stuff. And they are not the same. And a lot of people think they can do this stuff, the analytical, on the operational database. And you can't. It is fundamentally impossible. You need completely different data structures to do this sort of stuff. And a lot of people don't understand that either, which is very sad. Right, so we're going to choose and implement a CRM system, are we? Well, you guys can read that screen, and I hope it doesn't put you off. It may sound a bit cynical, and I guess it probably is, but it's real. Nobody really understands what's going to happen within an organization once you've implemented a CRM system. You can plan, and you'll still get it wrong. Your efforts will be actively resisted if you're trying to implement CRM, because there will be a lot of people that won't want you to do it because you are going to change their jobs so much, and it frightens them to death. And it's not easy, and experience shows that you will never finish it. It'll be an ongoing process. So, do we still want to go ahead and do it? Well, yes, I think we do want to do it. However, here are some statistics on IT projects in general, taken from 1995. Where it showed that only 16% of projects, IT projects, succeeded. 31% were completely abandoned, never implemented, and 53% got some measure of success, but they weren't wholly successful. If we move forward a few years to last year, the Standish Group came up with these figures. 37% success rate, 21% failure, 42% challenged. So, question, aren't we doing well? Well, the answer is, well, yes, success rate up from 16% to 37% in 16 years. Yeah, it's not bad, but no, we're not really doing quite so well, are we? We still have roughly, oh, what's that? We don't want that on there. Hide control panel. We still only have roughly a 1 in 3 chance of a successful project. Wow, that's scary, isn't it? That's scary. Why is that? Well, there's no such thing as an IT project today. There's only business projects. And business projects mean an equal measure of people, processes, and technology, which so many people don't really think about. They think, oh, it's technology. But it isn't. It's all about people, and it's all about changing processes. So what goes wrong? Well, people go wrong. Processes go wrong, and sometimes technology goes wrong. Actually, people screw up. They get it wrong. We're only human. We always get it wrong. Processes are inefficient. People don't want to change them. People get used to what they're doing, and they don't like the idea of change. 1 or 2 of us might like the idea of change and get excited by it and want to change things, but your average Joe public doesn't like change, and that's what screws up so many implementations. And then technology breaks. Well, sometimes, or usually in our case with CRM, the wrong technology is selected in the first place. And that's another fundamental area that we can control in terms of IT. So where are the failure points in CRM? Failure comes at 3 points. Firstly, the strategy formulation. So many organizations I talk to haven't got one, haven't got a CRM strategy. Why haven't they got one? Well, usually because they don't understand the ramifications of it. Or they've got one that's not realistic. They don't talk enough to people about it, or they just impose a strategy and people don't accept it. But that's not what we're here for today. Well, it's a huge area of failure. That's not what we're here for. What we're here for is the systems bits, the IT bits, and it comes into areas you choose the wrong system or you screw up the implementation. So we're going to look at some examples of those things where people chose the wrong systems, which I see happen all the time. I've been a consultant to this sector for over 20 years, and I've helped people do at least, I've probably helped with well over 100 system selections for CRM, and helped with an awful lot of implementations. And I see people who choose the wrong systems all the time, and it's not necessary. If you do it right, it's not necessary. So let's look at some system selection failures. I mean, I think this is more fun than talking theory and waffle. Let's talk about some real cases that I've seen. The first problem when people are choosing a system or multiple systems that make up a complete CRM solution is lack of knowledge. They don't know the marketplace, or they don't know the technology, but they choose things based on gut feel, based on who they know has got what system, so they just put in something similar to what someone else has got without thinking it through. Lack of knowledge is a huge one, where people often think that they can do their own thing and they don't need any help, and it's the reason why people like me are in business, because a lot of times they really need a lot of help. So here's an example of lack of knowledge. An organization that I helped choose a system for, they decided, before they met me of course, that there was nothing on the market that was going to do exactly what they wanted to do. They were a fairly small charity who gave grants to scientists to do research, and so they embarked on a bespoke development with a software house and signed a fixed price contract to develop their fundraising and grants system. They ended up spending £90,000 after the 24,000. The system never worked because the people they employed may have been competent programmers, but they didn't understand our marketplace, and finally they ended up buying what I call one of the usual suspects, i.e. one of the specialists in our marketplace. It should never have happened. They ended up, after I went to see them, buying one of these specialist databases for about the £24,000-25,000, the same price they were contracted to spend on a bespoke system. So the rest of the 90,000 was completely wasted, as well as the original 24. Another example, this is what I was told, that because I wasn't involved in the demonstrations, the chief executive said to me that this system looks really good. I really like this look of this system, and the salesman tells me that it'll pay for itself within 2 years, etc., etc., etc. I knew the system they were looking at, and I said, no, 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 no. I don't rate these people. They've only 3 customers in our marketplace. I'm a bit frightened of them. I wouldn't go to them. The guy went and bought the system anyway, and as you can see, as it says there, the company went out of business before the implementation was complete, and they had to start all over again, simply because he didn't have the knowledge. No one there had the knowledge to see through what was going on. And they saw, you can see what happened. Again, they wasted huge amounts of money. So lack of knowledge. Then another one, lack of staff involvement. How many times do you come across this where somebody imposes a system like this one, where it wasn't the chief executive, it was the chairman of trustees who thought he was doing the organisation a big favour, overruling the staff and saying, look, it's half the price of the others, and it looks okay to me, and you know, we can't turn down, I think it was less than half the price. It was £35,000 as opposed to £85,000 that the others were proposing. However, when they started trying to implement it, they soon found out why it was £35,000, because the software house were trying to use them as a test bed to develop more functionality and try and create a product that could really compete with the others. And a lot of the demonstrations were not exactly smoke and mirrors, but they were fiddled so that the people thought they were getting a good system, but it was only half developed. But the staff were ignored. I mean, you must listen to your people. And then, of course, this one happens all the time. This one does happen all the time. New director says, oh yeah, in the last place I was at, I used Razor's Edge, or I used Care, I used this, that's what we need, and just puts it in regardless, buys it regardless, irrespective of what the staff think or what the staff actually need. You've got to talk to people, you've got to get people involved, you've got to get a system that the people who work for you like using and want to use. So the staff involvement is very important. Another one, lack of a formal selection process. This happens all the time. One of my friends, they bought £20,000 system. They were a tiny organisation. There were only 2 people who needed to use it. We ended up replacing it with a very simple fundraising system that cost £2,000, saving them a fortune. Well, not really saving them a fortune because they'd already wasted all that money, but hopefully long term it will save them money, especially at £750 a year as opposed to £3,000. Crazy, absolutely crazy. Just taking somebody else's recommendation because they use it, just because another organisation uses it, doesn't mean it's going to be the right thing for you. Then this one quite interesting. When the client actually selected a system and talked the supplier into a 30-day free trial. On day 2 they rejected it and said, no, it won't work for us. And some people might say, well, that's a success because they had a free trial and they didn't end up buying it. But it's not really, because they should have identified they didn't have the functionality that they needed a lot earlier than that. If they'd had a formal process where they've done their requirements properly and got a proper response to their invitation to tender, that they would have seen that it was a bit lacking in what they needed. So they didn't have a proper process, and that's what happened. Then that leads on to this fundamental point about a lack of a detailed requirement specification. The first one, I've seen this several times, where the requirement specification, the invitation to tender, was one A4 page, and they really did say afterwards, once it was in and working, they said, well, I can't do this and I can't do that and I can't do something else. And well, no, I'm sorry, you didn't ask for that. This happens regularly, absolutely regularly. And the other extreme to that was a 400-page requirement specification, which wasn't really a detailed requirement specification. It was a procedures manual that said how they do all their manual procedures, and as a result, the supplier had to do all sorts of bespoke development, and they ended up with a monstrous system that wasn't really suitable at all. Where if they'd done proper requirements, they would have a system. And I don't know if this is interesting to people, but those are some real-life case histories from work that I've done with people. And here is a sort of summary of golden rules for selection success. Firstly, involve your staff. Involve your staff all the way through the process. Then you should define your objectives and make sure everybody knows what they are. Requirements are fundamentally important, and as are priorities. The techie IT people like to use what we call Moscow rules. I personally use something that's a little more understandable. I get people to allocate priorities as to mandatory, desirable, luxury, and future, and they are very important when you come to choosing your final system, because you can soon see who does what and who's going to do what in the future, and who does the things that you want to do in the future, and you can soon start sorting out which is the best system for you from that. So many people actually change their selection criteria once they've got their proposals in. Well, that's wrong. You should do selection criteria before you get proposals, and you should stick to them. I had a case where somebody came up with their criteria, they scored everything, and a certain product came out ahead, and everybody said, oh, I don't want that one, I want the other one. Nightmare, don't do that. Beware of salesmen. Some of them still tell a few porcupines, I'm afraid. Most of them I deal with these days in our sector are pretty straight, but you still get those that exaggerate, and you have to be very careful and do some very careful checking of the products. References are important, as is the money, looking to the long-term cost, not just the initial cost. You've got to have knowledge. You've got to have someone who understands what it's all about. And the last point, try before you buy. Some of the suppliers don't like you doing this, but you can insist on it. You can insist on a free trial. Well, I find it usually works, and you learn an awful lot from there. So that's where people go wrong in the first place, selection. Then, of course, once you've selected your product, you've got to implement it. And as I always say to people, system implementations are painful. They're going to take a long time. They're going to be a complete nightmare. The conversion of your data from your old system will take seemingly forever. You will get it wrong half a dozen times. People won't understand. It'll be a painful process. But hopefully it's going to be worth it in the end. So I've used painful as an acronym, and the first P stands for politics. This is very important. You've got to get the politics within your organization right, and this is where a lot fail. These are real-life case histories, and one of my clients selected a system. All the staff were involved. Everybody agreed. We had consensus as to the product we wanted to implement. And then one department decided that nobody else should see their customers, their contacts. They had to be completely shielded, and that goes against the fundamental principle of CRM with its 360-degree view, but they were very important. They had a very tough director, and he overruled everybody. And the result was a huge complex system with, as I say, bureaucratic procedures, i.e. manual paper procedures in order to provide the single supporter view. So they never achieved it. They never achieved the single supporter view, the 360-degree view, whatever you like to call it. They never achieved it. No one in control. Again, one of the usual suspects, as I call them, is chosen. So one would think that this will probably go okay because it's a good product. Unfortunately, they started with the department that had the biggest problems. The implementation took a year, and when Department 2 decided they were ready to implement the system, they found, well, we can't work with this. The way you set up the system tables, they don't work for us. So it was a complete nightmare and took 4 years to implement, which it needn't have happened if they thought it more in the first place. A decent project manager who thought things through. Arrogance. The A stands for arrogance, and I'm afraid there's an awful lot of arrogance around. This is again related to the selection process. The chief executive who chose the system, and then when the staff tried to implement it and said, look, it just doesn't work, it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that, we don't want the system. The chief exec said, make it work, it's a good system. And they actually spent a lot of money on bespoke work to try and put in the bits that didn't work. and the staff didn't use it because even the bespoke bits they didn't like, so they did their own Access and Excel systems and didn't tell the boss. I don't know how often that sort of thing happens, but it does happen now and again. People are arrogant. And another case of the boss knows best, and this was a case where the system was too clever for people. They preferred the simple, not very sophisticated system. They weren't a very sophisticated organization. The director chose this particular product because it really was state of the art, and the staff, half the staff tried to use it and gave up because they just couldn't cope with it. Worked okay, but they couldn't cope with the complexity of it, and so they ended up not using it. The director left, moved to another organization where he instead of being the fundraising director, he was chief exec, and of course chaos ensued, and there was no resolution. And right to this day, I don't think there's been any resolution. So the boss knows best sometimes, I don't think. Incompetence, again related to arrogance. This organization had 3 CRM systems in 5 years. Now that's a nightmare. You usually try and keep a system for around 7 years, I think is about average in the UK, before you start thinking about either replacing it or seriously upgrading it. But 3 to 5 years was a bit scary. There were 3 trustees involved. The first trustee was the project, what we call him. He was the project sponsor, and he knew nothing. Anyway, if I don't speed up, we won't get through all these. So let's speed up it. In the experience, a consultant did the requirements. The client chose the supplier. Consultants made a mistake. Client said, no, I want them. 12 months later, this is real. I remember this. This was fun. And I got up the phone and I heard this familiar voice. And he said, I want you to help me sue this supplier. Naturally, I didn't help him. I said, no, you haven't got a leg to stand on, mate. You were warned. Let's move on quickly. Nearsightedness. People don't think things through. They don't look at the big picture. This is just a real case, and it happens quite often. The one department, this was the events department, as I recall, found that their old spreadsheet that they used to manage events was a lot quicker than this great big clunky CRM system, so they never used it. So they never got a single supported view. No resolution to that either. There are solutions to the problem, but they never found one. Procedural changes. One department in this particular organization refused to change their procedure, so they hired extra staff to cope with the extra workload, which was a complete load of rubbish. It needn't have happened at all if they'd just been a little open-minded and said, all right, we can do things differently. But they didn't. Fear. Now, this is probably the biggest one, actually. People are frightened of change. They don't like change. So in this organization, people insisted that it had to be done like this. And so they spent millions. This is a huge organization. And they spent millions of pounds on a bespoke system, and they eventually, after about 10 or 12 years, decided that they were doing the wrong thing, and they bought one of the systems eventually. It's because people don't like change, and they're frightened of it. in this particular organisation, of the 150 jobs involved, 30 were going to disappear, 100 would be changed, and only 20 remained the same. And it was so difficult to implement those changes, because people were so frightened of change that it never happened within 3 years when another system was proposed. So it never got implemented properly because people were just frightened of it and didn't use it properly. Unfamiliarity. This is again, people are unfamiliar with systems in a lot of different ways. And this particular one, there was one person who actually managed the whole system, and when he left, no one else knew how to do it. This is related to the thing of retaining knowledge that I mentioned earlier in the selection. And the system actually collapsed eventually because no one knew how to keep it running properly. You wouldn't think that would happen these days, but it still does. Now this one is a general point, not on time. At least 20 times as a consultant I've been asked, my system doesn't work and I want you to help choose another one. And well, not 20 times, probably 120 times, but 20 times I've convinced them that you're wrong. The system does do all the things you want it to do, and really all you need is some more training, or you haven't upgraded, or you've implemented it wrongly, or some reason, but it's okay, it does work. And so I've saved an awful lot of money. They don't think it's through properly. Lethargy, here we are, the last one about painful. Staff are too busy, and they've got a job to do. I don't criticise them at all. They've just got a job to do, a day job, and they can't sometimes spend the time. Well, you have to find some way around that. But in this particular case, they said, no, we can't spend this time testing this system out. You do it for us. Well, project manager did it, and he didn't do the day jobs, did he? So he didn't know exactly how the staff wanted to use the system. So he said it worked, and the staff said, no, it doesn't. Well, they should have found some way around that. This one is a bit unusual in that the staff were too busy, the project team were too busy, they never developed any proper procedures, and so you end up with a mess, which is quite interesting because in this particular case I know this organisation and the temporary database administrator is still there after 3 years. So what can we learn from all this? The biggest problem is people. Firstly, you've got to get the right people doing the right job. The first person you need is a proper project sponsor, and you should be the chief executive. I go back to my first point that CRM is not an IT thing, it's a total organisational thing. So it's got to come from the top. That's not easy to do quite often, but if you don't get the chief exec, you might not get a proper implementation. You might not be able to bang heads together and get people to agree to things. You need the chief exec. Then you need a decent project manager with the right experience. Then you need a project team who represents all staff, all of the staff, and who are involved right from the very conception to the final review of the operating system at the end. And then you might need external support. You might need a consultant to help. You might need a proper project manager. You might need temporary staff to take over the duties of your existing staff while they test systems and do other things within the project. You might need some extra help. More about people in general. There is such a thing as organisational inertia. We needn't go into that. I've written a paper on it, but we don't want to go there. but it's important that people fear change and actively resist it. A lot of people. They're not all like you and me who are enthusiastic about new technology. So it's up to the management to actually change these people's attitude, to provide the vision and be enthusiastic and give them the chance to learn new things and encourage them, involve them in everything. I've got on their need to manage expectations, and often that is our expectations of how wonderful life will be in the future. You need to be realistic in what you're trying to achieve. And communication is just vital. If you don't communicate to people all the time, they're not going to support you. And as the bottom line says, boredom and disillusionment if timescale is too long. I've seen implementations take 2, 3, 4 years. That's not right. If it takes more than 12 months, people are going to get fed up and they won't cooperate. Processes are always going to change. If you put in a CRM system in particular, it's a lot of change involved. So be prepared to change, review current processes, work with the supplier. The supplier knows what they're doing usually, especially what I call the usual suspects have been there, done it, got a t-shirt about 1,000 times. They can probably advise you on how you change processes and change people's job descriptions and help them change to a new way of working. And that isn't easy. That isn't easy, and that's often not done. But it's very, very important. Technology, well, technology sometimes fails, but not very often. Testing is what you need to manage the technology. And you do need to manage your supplier. Don't let them manage you. Work with them. Don't just take everything they say for granted. And finally, about technology. Technology really rarely fails. People always blame the computer, but 99 times out of 100, it's nothing to do with the systems. It's to do with people. They have unrealistic expectations. They don't specify what they want properly. They don't carry out due diligence. They don't realize the true scale of the project. I should have put that one in huge capitals, I think. They don't realize the true scale of the CRM project. They choose a system and then sit back and expect it to happen. Yes, that happens all the time. They think that once they've chosen the system, they've done the hard work. They don't realize that the hard work is just beginning. And they are overly protective of their area. Data silos all over the place, and they don't like change. So, sort that out, all that luck, and you might have a successful project. And as I say, good luck. So now I'm open for questions.
Yeah, thanks very much, Peter. That's very comprehensive, and I think it's very useful in general. We do have a few questions here. The first one from Debbie, going back to earlier when you talked about the system selection failure, you mentioned that one of the tips to avoid that is to define the requirements well. Debbie is asking, when you mention define requirements, are you talking about system requirements or functionality requirements?
I'm talking both of those things. Really, yes, both of those things. Functionality requirements are fundamentally important. I'm not quite sure what she means by system requirements. Probably what I call non-functional requirements, but you have to do them as well. Those are the things, you know, the slightly non-specific things like it must be easy to use and stuff like that. It's just as important. You must have some element of those things as well. So, in my requirement specs that I do, I mean, I've got a requirements list of 2,500 bullet points that I've built up over the years for CRM systems, and one section of that is non-functional requirements. So they're just as important as functional requirements. It's just that the functional requirements list is about 10 times as long as the non-functional ones.
Great. We have Pip and Suzanne asking the same question here. I think you mentioned about usual suspects. So they're asking, who are these usual suspects and who are some of the smaller ones?
I don't know if the usual suspects are the same in Australia as in the UK, but we have, I mean, there's about there's more than 100 different suppliers, particularly in the UK, who say they can do CRM for the not-for-profit sector. Well over 100, in fact, these days. And I have a list of about 40 odd that I think are credible, of which about 12 to 15 come up all the time. And these are people like you in Australia will certainly have heard of the Razor's Edge. You will have heard of Thank You. You will have heard of ASI with IMIS and Progress. There is the Iris company that's now got about 6 products in its portfolio, or at least 6, with Care, Integra, Donor Strategy, Member Strategy. There's Advantage NFP. That's a start. You've probably heard of some of those names. There are more.
A question from Peter, or a different Peter, is how do you determine how much you should spend on a CRM system? It is often very difficult to determine the value that a new system can add.
It's very difficult to determine what value you're going to get out of your system, and the business case that you should do before you start is not easy, and you often cannot actually nail down exactly what benefit you'll get from it, and often your benefits are going to be are not going to be particularly in pound notes or dollar bills. It's just going to make life easier for you, and so you can't say we will spend X pounds or X dollars. You spend however much you need to spend to get the functionality you need for the number of people you're implementing the system for. So if you're a huge organization, you might figure you're going to spend hundreds of thousands. If you're a small organization, you might figure you can get away with 10,000, but you've really got to go to the market to find out what it costs. So you spend what it costs. You can't say I'm such and such an organization with a $1 million turnover, so I will only spend 20,000 on the system. You can't say that. It costs what it costs, and you have to find out what it's going to cost.
So relating to that question, Suzanne was asking, how much does a cheap system cost? So is it possible even to give like a figure for that?
Oh yeah. I mean, in the UK, we have everything from £100 to £1 million. I mean, we've got in the UK. I don't know if it's available worldwide. There's a cheap little system for a single user system that does all the basics. It's not like Razor's Edge, but it does all the basics for £100. You get a basic system, single user. You get no support other than by email, but it stops you having to do, if you're a tiny organization, it stops you having to write your own thing in Access or FileMaker or any of that nonsense that we used to do 10 or 12 years ago. And it just goes up from there. I mean, a typical 5-user system will probably, in the UK, cost about £10,000. maybe £5,000 to £10,000. I've got some proposals in at the moment for a 12-user system, and it was between 25 and £30,000. I've got proposals in for a 20-user system, and it was up to £50,000. This is for a complete implementation with training and with conversion of data from the old system, etc. That's the sort of prices you're paying. I don't know what prices are like in Australia, because it's more than 30 years since I was in Australia, so I wasn't doing this type of work when I was doing systems work in Australia.
There's also a question on, do you recommend a Big Bang implementation or a phased approach, and what is a typical time frame for CRM implementation? I think you mentioned before less than 12 months or something.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I don't recommend Big Bang implementation. I recommend a phased implementation, but phases that follow on PDQ. Not a great long thing that extends over years. Get the system in, get it up and running, put the first department on perhaps one that you have to do all the configuration for everybody, but actually implementing, get the first department on that perhaps doesn't need any data converted, who can start from scratch. Quite often, for example, I found events departments who are quite happy to just get started because they've got an event coming up, and they're only going to invite a certain small number of people, and they can key those names in and just get going with the system while all the time you're working on converting data for other departments. You're definitely phased, but phased over a very short period. And a typical implementation is between 6 and 9 months. I allow 9 months usually, and if it goes over a year, you're doing something wrong, or it's huge. You are a huge organization, but for a typical organization, 9 months is about right. And most of that time you spent doing cuts of conversion of data and checking the data and changing the rules for converting and things like that.
Great. What sort of things should we include in the selection criteria when looking at implementing a CRM?
Right. Well, it's a bit up to you. Everybody looks at cost first. I like to look at cost last. But you should have a series of things like how many of your requirements the system does as standard, for example, whether how other people react to the system when you do site visits to other people using the system, what they think of it, how competent you think the supplier is. There's a huge list of things. You know, it's a bit up to you, really. I mean, I've probably got a list of 20 or 30 things that I could dig out, but I guess it's partly the functionality of the system, partly how they work, partly their track record, and partly cost.
Suzanne was asking, there are some open source systems about. Are they okay for small operations?
The answer to that is yes, but be very, very careful which ones you choose. The only one that I recommend in the UK here is Civi CRM, because it's specifically tailored to the not-for-profit sector, and it's getting a pretty good reputation here. There are quite a few others that have been used, some of which work, some of which don't. and I'm very wary of them. But certainly, if you're a small organization, definitely have a look at Civi CRM. I quite like it. If you're a bigger organization, of course, if you want to go down the software as a service route, these days you can start looking at Salesforce, because not-for-profit organizations get 10 licenses free, although it's a big monstrous system and it'll cost you a few quid to get it configured for your organization. But it's certainly stealing the thunder of a lot of the usual suspects here. But if she's in a small organization, look at Civi CRM.
Speaking of Civi CRM, I thought I might just let you guys know they are still online, that we are having a webinar on Civi CRM on the 11th of October. I will send you the link to register on my follow-up email. Some more question. You mentioned before, Peter, about the system that only costs £100 for one single user. Pip was wondering if you can tell us what it's called.
It's called KISS Contacts. KISS. It is the old acronym. Keep it simple, stupid. But it's called KISS Contacts. So just look up KISS Contacts on the web. You'll find it.
Great, thank you. And the last question that we have at the moment is from Suzanne. If she's asking about Microsoft Dynamics and what your thoughts are on that.
In the UK, we have quite a few software houses who are now doing not-for-profit sector implementations of Microsoft Dynamics CRM. So it is up and coming. It is now getting quite a lot of the functionality, so the specific fundraising and membership functionality that we use in the not-for-profit sector, whereas say 2, 3, 4 years ago, although it was a good CRM system, well, Microsoft, yeah, it was a good CRM system, sort of. Eventually they've got, what are we up to, about version 5 or something. It's now a good CRM system, and we have quite a few suppliers putting in specific not-for-profit sector functionality. So yes, it is a definite runner to be considered against the usual suspects these days.
And on that note, I will also just mention, if you haven't already known, that Connecting Up does, as obviously through our technology donation program, Microsoft donates their products through us, and Dynamics is available. And if you want more information, just email me about it. That was the last of the questions we have. I don't think there's any more. I think we're pretty much right on time finishing it. And once again, Peter, I want to thank you very much for taking time in the early morning of the UK to do this, do the webinar. And I'm sure if you need any help from Connecting Up to help you build presence here or anything, we'll be more likely, we would love to help you out as well. And thank you again to everyone who has attended. It's almost the end of the day, so I wish you a good rest of the day, and a good rest of the day for you too, Peter. Thank you.
Okay, well, it was nice to talk to you. It's actually daylight now, so I'll go downstairs and have breakfast.
All right.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.